Wheel of Genre, the show for readers who know the real horror comes from middle management. Each month we spin the wheel and land on a new genre. Spies, mysteries, horror, romance, SF, it's all on the shelf. And right now we are reading horror novels.
That's right, and this time we're reading all books by Jeff VanderMeer: Annihilation, Authority, Acceptance, and Absolution.
And this time it's Authority. I'm Zach, and this week I'm really interested in the switch in focus that this series has taken from the insistence that the terror is outside in the wilderness to now the terror is in the workplace.
Isn't it true? I'm Bob. I'm interested in composting, Zach. I'm really interested in compost. And I think that is how this book is informed, how it's put together. You're right. Lots of people hate this book. I don't know if you've noticed that. Whenever people talk about Authority, they're like, this is the worst one of the series. I loved Annihilation. I got to Authority, and then I quit. All the videos I see are about this. And I think it's a very underrated book, but it does feel like a big pile of compost.
Holy smoke. So I had no idea that was the general reception of this book. Somehow, some why, I thought this series was kind of universally beloved, start to finish. I don't want to say reservations about the book, because I do like the book. I do have questions about how it stands in a narrative sense with the rest of the series. But first off, let's give the haters their due time. Why do you think people don't like this book?
Haters gotta hate. I think because, Annihilation, like you said, you're in the crazy wilderness. You see all of these beasts. You're there. You're actually in Area X. Now, wanting a sequel, people probably want more of Area X. And I really like how Jeff VanderMeer does a total 180. And now we're just trapped in office space for 8 hours. It feels kind of boring. The mysteries are all it's like you're trying to look at Area X, but you're just circling around it, and you can never really look inside. You're never really inside it. I think we get more information about Area X than ever, a lot more than we got in Annihilation, yet we still feel quite far away. I think when you're expecting something and you don't get what you want, maybe that is the bad reception of this book.
You rebel.
You rebel.
So, one thing that you gestured towards at the start of what you were saying is the idea that, in the first book, we're venturing out into this area. You're strangers in a strange land, so to speak. The first book had a very familiar structure, had a very familiar premise. We are intrepid explorers going out to the wilderness, and we know something unexpected is waiting for us, but we don't know how we will react or what it is or why it's there. But we know something bad is going to happen. That much is more or less assured to us at the very beginning. And I think it delivers in that. With this book, I feel like we are in a completely new territory, not just like the in the setting sense, but also for fiction itself. I can't think of any similar book that I've read that even comes close to this kind of dynamic, where it's a bureaucratic look at a terror that is somewhere else, but not actually there. It seems like a lot of the horror is given to us by revealing new aspects of Area X from a fresh set of eyes and from a fresh perspective. I didn't realize that this book pretty much just takes place in, the first week of this person's employment here. It's like new employee orientation. He's just discovering how bad his new job is.
Well, it reminded me a lot. I mean, it is unfamiliar to us because we're meeting these characters for the first time, but it also is like running into Michael Scott over and over and over again. But yeah, we have a new character. We still have the biologist. However, we're not really sure if it's the same biologist. In the last book, we're wondering, is she changing a lot? Is she actually dead? What happened to her? Now we see her again, and she even starts to doubt herself who she is. So we are seeing things through fresh eyes, but it's interesting because everyone else has been there for 30 years. They've been stuck at this place. They hate Southern Reach. Well, at least no one takes Southern Reach seriously. They all still are interested in it, but they know they're kind of at the end of their careers. It's like a band of misfits. It's where all the broken toys go, Southern Reach. But that's why, to me, it feels like compost. All of these careers are all ended. Control, the main character, the narrator, he asked them to call him Control. That's his old name from his grandpa, and it's related to what we've seen from Le Carre, where Control is the head of the circus. But everything has gone wrong for him, and now he ends up here, and it's just a place for people who everything bad has happened to them, and they're just barely surviving. I feel like it's a big pile of mistakes, as it feels like compost, rotting.
Yeah. I like this framing that you're giving it of a kind of collection of misfits. Like it's the Breakfast Club or something. Like, hey, we're all here in detention together. Yeah, I mean, I think that this book is it's tough because it's so unsettling, but it's not. Oh, to me, it didn't always feel successfully unsettling as like horror. But what it was successful for me was as a bundle of relationships, and that includes the kind of workplace rivalry that you see happening, the vying for power within this organization, but also the relationship between the mother and John Rodriguez and the voice, and also him and Ghostbird. I hate to reduce all books to this, but I think it was like Slavoj Žižek or something who said, at the heart of every book is just two people trying to get together, trying to have sex with each other or something like that. But it's yeah, really at the heart of this book is a family dynamic that this person needs to overcome, the relationship between him and his mother and his grandfather before that. And also the heart of this is apparently him slowly falling in love with this Ghostbird. But it's never played out. It's never admitted to be that kind of romance. But as a astute reader, you can tell that clearly he's disclosing more and more of himself. And the more that he discloses, the more that she discloses. And there's obviously a rapport and a relationship that develops, culminating with the end of the book.
I mean, they even play I'll show you mine if you show me yours with their questions. There's a lot of tension. But I think that is also an element of composting. It's strange when he comes in because she's the biologist and she demands that the biologist demands of Control, you have to call me Ghostbird. But that's weird because that is the nickname that her former husband used to call her. It's a pet name that only he knew. And now she's demanding of this guy, call me Ghostbird. It's like their residues of these old relationships are suddenly rising up to the surface and they're not exactly sure how to play them. So you have certain things that are familiar to you or comfortable and you just bring them back up. It's like the return, what is that called? The return of the repressed, just bubbling up in this big pile of compost. I know I keep saying compost, but there's just weird images in this, like the dead rat in the house plant. Why on earth is that there? And there's all of these strange old relationships. Like you said, John Rodriguez is just remembering all of these things and even tells us, I don't know why this memory has just surfaced, but here it is. And then he'll tell us a weird thing about his past. He can't get over his past. Ghostbird doesn't know if she's alive or not. And eventually she even tells him, I'm not the biologist. They get into a big fight. This is weird. There is hauntings going on in this. And while it feels like a very mundane office romance, it's like a Pam and Jim romance. It's not funny. But here
she's in prison.
Yeah, except she's in prison. Yeah, her 40-foot cell, doing push-ups and pull-ups constantly. But I think it's a different kind of horror. In the first book, we got very Lovecraftian, original weird, and now it feels like Reddit. Like the No Sleep podcast.
Oh yeah,
and the stories on Reddit, where we have weird, inexplicable things happening to you, and they just start to compound. They start to get more and more until you can't take it anymore. And that is the nature of the horror here. Does it feel like a different horror to you?
Well, yes. But I just want to say I love your use of the word compost, even though you don't want to, you said, I don't want to keep using it. But like really anyone who's composted before knows that, yeah, you dump watermelon rinds into compost, you dump corn, you dump, strawberries into compost. And those are all individual objects. Wait, what'd you say?
Eggshells. Sorry.
I was going to say eggshells, but then I was like, wait, is that one of those things you're not supposed to compost?
Okay.
I know you're not supposed to compost meat. Anyways, you dump all those things in, but after 3 months or 6 months or whatever, like they're not eggshells and watermelon rinds, and they're not strawberries anymore. You know what I mean? They all they mulch together. Their boundaries erode until they're just one slimy mass of filth. And I think that it's actually a great description for what is going on here because once again, like with the last book, meaning itself is just constantly weirded out with a capital W weird. We don't know what anything is. And I'm trying to tie this back to answer your question about the horror, but that we reading this, we want it to be horror. You know what I mean? We want that so bad, but it constantly evades our expectations. My favorite example of this is that black phone. And he looks at it and he's
Oh
like,
yeah.
oh, yeah, it's like a beetle. And you're like,
Mm.
oh, is it alive? Is it a beetle? And he's like, oh, and you want an answer to that. And then it's like, oh, it's in
Mm.
my bag. How did that get there? And you're like, oh my God, the phone moves. That's what you want it to be. And then it's like he starts falling asleep and he hears scuttling, on the roof. And you're
Mhm.
like, oh my God. Like, the writing makes you want to be like, oh my God, the phone is crawling around. You know what I mean? The phone can move of its own accord. But we never get actual answers on that. You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
him seeing that happens in that liminal state between wakefulness and dreaming. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And then when he throws it in the woods, oh my God, it came back. It's just like those classic horror tropes where you try to get rid of the Chucky doll or the Slappy doll if you're a Goosebumps reader, and it always comes back. But oh wait, it was the neighbor who found it and left a note on the porch for him. You know what I mean? We never get solid answers that would put this firmly in the horror territory. We just get weirded liminal dwellings in between this and that.
Until Zach, my favorite character. I thought this was the best part of the whole book, maybe of the whole series. Whitby. Whitby is the best character. I don't care about Controller Ghostbird anymore. I just care about Whitby. That was incredible. That was right out of Reddit. And there's little kind of hints throughout because when he's walking in the office and he'll hear something in the air ducts and he thinks he hears laughing at one point, but he knows he's going a little bit crazy. He's, like you said, he's underslept, he's sleep deprived, and he just keeps walking. And then Whitby keeps saying, hey, I've got a special place I want to show you. Whoa. Approaches a few times and he keeps denying Whitby. Then finally Control goes up into there's a pull down ladder and he goes up into the ceiling and he's crawling into the ceiling. He sees these crazy drawings. It's like a demented Sistine Chapel of all of the office people. If you imagine the office and there's all of their faces drawn but turned into monsters, and then he's looking at all of these strange monstrous people and then feels breathing on the back of his neck, and Whitby reaches out and just pets his head. And nothing is ever said between them about it. Oh, I love Whitby.
Yeah.
So it gets very horror. Yeah.
It does get very horror, but that's like a unhinged coworker horror. That's that's unhinged coworker horror. But it borders on supernatural or even psychedelic horror in the sense that we don't know if he's just like, we never get confirmation of whether he's just a crazy kooky guy, weirdo Whitby, or if he's actually something transformed himself. And we get hints, like for example, he locks eyes with Whitby. And then he's like, I'm just going to turn around. And he says Whitby's hand goes on the back of his head and it's like a starfish. It's like the starfish's legs crawling around a rock. Yeah. And it's like, well, is it actually, like is Whitby's hand actually starfish like in the way that these drawings that Whitby has drawn would seem to suggest? I don't know. We don't know. We never get visual confirmation. There's also this moment where he's like, wait a minute, the ladder was pulled away. How does Whitby getting up and down from this place? You know what I mean? And in that moment, there's a kind of suggestion that, he's doing something animal like flying perhaps. You know what I mean? The way he contorts his body seems to suggest something animalistic. He places himself on a shelf in a really weird way. Whitby does.
Sideways too, yeah.
Yeah, and also, he keeps finding in these moments of like groaning agony that seem to suggest some kind of transformation is happening. And then, the final part is we get this thing on video at the very end. He gets into video clip of Whitby's hand waving in a way that suggests soft coral underwater. And again, the non-specificity of the language does not tell us whether an actual transformation like that has happened. He seems disturbed as though it is, but it's not clear whether it's merely just a simile. That is that slipperiness of the text that I'm just constantly like, I want to pin it down, but if we pinned it down, it would not be as good.
And I think Whitby is such a good example of not being able to pin things down. There's another moment when they have an awkward moment, and he's like, "Oh God, what do I say to Whitby?" And so he just says, "Oh, how about some of those crazy theories about Area X?" And Whitby says, "Oh, I know. What about the one where it's another dimension laying over our dimension?" And then he starts thinking like, it feels like I'm talking to more than one Whitby. It's like there's two emotions happening at once, as if Whitby can control both. As if there are 3 or 2 or 4 Whitbys layering over one another. And that's Whitby's theory that he starts telling him about. He's like, look, what if there's a different dimension where we solved everything and there is no Area X? What if there's a different dimension? And it just keeps going and going until Rodriguez also starts fantasizing about weird different Whitbys to the point where Whitby is his substitute teacher in his old math class. So Whitby is very interesting, and he is just like Area X. I started thinking Whitby kind of functions like the crawler in Annihilation in this book, whereas the crawler was a Lovecraft monster. Now Whitby is a Reddit monster in this one, and he brings up the same questions that the crawler did in the last one, like, what is the point of Area X? Is it a religious experience? Is it nature coming back? Is it the repressed nature coming back? And now Whitby is giving all of these new theories to us too. Is Area X just another dimension layering over one dimension? I think he's a pretty key, although he seems like he's there for comic relief, but I think he's a very important character, almost as important as the crawler in a way.
I thought one of my favorite parts of the story was the constant attempts to intellectualize Area X. I thought that was actually really, really successful. And this is a tactic that we see from Lovecraft, right? You have these kind of, an anthropologist who, is looking at some weird thing that people are doing. And it turns out to be some, terrible monster or something like that, some terrible cosmic being. But here we're given every possible theory in the book and no endorsement of anyone from the author. Yeah. And I just kind of love that. One thing that really stuck out to me was, okay, so like in the first book, Area X is like described as a thorn basically in the side of the earth, and a thorn is something that comes from outside, and we're kind of led to believe that it's alien, But one thing I was thinking about while reading this book is that I think every alien story, like whether in fiction or in, pop culture or whatever, alien stories are all about technology, right? It's aliens using a Stargate to come here, or it's UFOs, or, abduction. The abduction happens through a kind of technology, or cattle mutilation. It's a surgical process, But this book does not give us any technological aspect to this. It's simply another ecosystem transposed over our own. And I can't think of another book that like does that. It's just something foreign, but it's spreading like black mold does on a bathroom wall,
And you know what's interesting too? They said that in doing samples there, they've looked at it and there is no trace of anything human. There's no trace of any plastics, no trace of any metals that have been chemically changed by humans. So it's like this imposition of this other ecosystem has erased anything foreign. So it's a completely preserved natural reserve. It's very eerie because at the same time it describes what happened 30 years ago when the event happened. And I think in the movie it's called The Shimmer, maybe, and you can actually see it. But in the book you can't see it, but it's just almost a force field. When it appeared, a destroyer, like a ship, went into it, and they just watched as the destroyer continued to disappear into this strange force field, and people just disappeared and waited at the end of the boat until it was their time. A weird place.
No matter how much they say that it's natural and pristine, we are given hints that it's not entirely natural. One of the things I was thinking about was how at one point, I think the biologist says like, oh, there's this species of, ant here, but this ant doesn't live at this elevation. You know what I mean? It's like, it's a pristine environment, but it's not a perfect copy. It's like someone's reimagination. There are things that are out of place. There are things that shouldn't be there. There are flowers that don't exist in this area, and yet they are there. And that's kind of like the tell. It's an outsider's idea of what the natural looks like. Like, for example, when I was a kid, it was very common to go to like friend's house and they had these posters of like an image of the deep sea, for example. And it's like, oh, there's an orca here. It's like a taxonomy of every animal you find in the deep sea, but in a 100 square foot radius. And it's like, yeah, you wouldn't find all of these like in the same place. You know what I mean? These like illustrated poster designs. And I feel like that's kind of what we get with Area X is almost like a zoo, a taxonomy, an outsider's rendition of a functioning system.
That orca has a human eye. Yes, I think it does. It still feels alien, like you said. Maybe there's a zoo going on. I was watching another interview with VanderMeer, and he was talking about one thing that he was most interested in is seeing the permeability between nature and our bodies and our reaction to that. So earlier we talked about things rotting, compost, things like that. But when we think about, if you think too much about all of the bacteria in your gut or all of the little bacteria walking around, you go a little bit nuts. You start to feel really uncomfortable. There's a scene in here where there's a woman, she's got this red ant. I think it's maybe the same ant you're referring to. It's crawling on her hair, and she's freaking out. Control goes to help her. But he wanted to explore the idea of that border between humans, which are part of nature, but part of society, and nature. And where does it cross? And he thinks that there's a uncanny element to that border. When society goes too far into nature, it's an uncanny. And then when nature comes too far into society, it's uncanny in a way. So Area X is almost like it's its own uncanny valley, kind of.
So I was finishing up this book today, and I promise this is going somewhere. I promise this is relevant. But I was eating a plate of fruit, and I started thinking, just like, what is fruit? What is my relationship to fruit? What is humanity as animals and an ecosystem's relationship to fruit? And I started looking it up online, and like, fruit didn't exist until there were animals basically to eat it. They had like a codependent evolutionary, they co-developed together. Is what I'm trying to say. When you think about that as like plants as a branch in the tree, basically being like, we're going to tempt animals to eat us by taking our seeds and coating them in sugar so that we can lure animals in and take them and get our genes planted elsewhere. That is a long-term evolutionary relationship between plants and animals. And it got me thinking that part of the weirdness of Area X is that it's like a facsimile of that, but there's no history to it. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? Like, the part of the weirdness of the ecology here is that there's no long-term evolutionary history. It's just thrown up like a tent in a field.
Just thinking I've been duped by fruit so many times now. It does feel, yeah. So there's no evolutionary history to Area X. It still has all of the DNA, or at least it appears to, because it's reproducing things that we are familiar with. When they go in, they see animals that they've seen, but they are strange. And the other thing is there's something broken about the relationship. There's no clear codependence, and it feels like a malicious relationship where it's a predator, or feels like a parasitic relationship almost, where it's taking the DNA and turning it into something monstrous or something we're not familiar with at all that becomes uncanny. I was thinking about there's a section called the superstition. And there's this idea that if you say the words aloud, the words that the biologist discovered in the last book, that the crawler is writing on the word, will that cause another event? Is that what made it happen? And they start thinking about Saul Evans, who was he was a preacher before. And then 5 years before the event happened, he retired as a preacher and he became a lighthouse keeper. And he is the one writing this scripture on the wall. And what you've said about it not participating correctly or it not participating at all, the fracture, there's something interesting about the superstition of, okay, if we say words, will it happen again or will something worse happen? There's this play between society, or at least for us, Southern Reach, and Area X, where if Southern Reach does something, Area X might be provoked and react. That's what the director was doing before, the psychologist. She was trying to get a reaction. And I wonder if it appears to not link together, but I wonder if the expansion of Area X can be provoked, can be a reaction, because at the very end, it does start to expand. So the language is not clear, but I wonder if there is still a common language between society and Area X.
And part of the tantalizing part of this book is that we simply just don't get any answers. Only speculation. I hope that I was gonna say I hope it wraps up in the finale, but I guess we got 2 more chances for it to get some answers. I suspect we won't get any, and that would be perfectly okay. I do have something that I did want to ask you. This is a sequel. It seems obvious to say that, but I want to know whether you think, in terms of being a sequel, is it successful? And maybe to add a little weight to that, I'll say, previously in our detective novels that we were reading, we were saying, does the author have a obligation to make us fall in love with characters we've met before? You know what I mean? Like if we have a hero detective or James Bond, for example, does the author need to keep on reintroducing them? Do they, or at some point, or is it bad if at some point the author just says, yeah, you know who they are, I'm just going to get on with the story? Does it make it for a lesser book?
Man, diamonds are forever. What a bad taste. What a rotten fruit. That is different because I feel like every James Bond book is exactly the same. And, it's the same structure. I really like but a lot of them are really fun. It's just we didn't like Diamonds Are Forever, and that was disappointing because I wanted a James Bond book where James Bond is fun, and it was just stupid. Here, I think Jeff VanderMeer has done something very cool because while he could have reproduced Annihilation and just sent another team out there, I bet he'll do that in one of the later books. But instead of doing that, he said, no, I'm going to pivot completely and look at this from a completely different angle and just think about how I'm going to learn more about Area X by doing that. Because I think he still is not really sure what it is either. Maybe he still hasn't figured that out himself after 4 books. But if he just did the exact same thing, it's going to become artificial what he discovers about it. Now we have people who are on the outside, and while they have been there for 30 years, it's just as much a mystery to them as it has ever been. And it feels to me, the reader, I am still experiencing this mystery, and it's as mysterious as it was in the first book, even though I'm learning more about it. And that is pretty exciting to be able to do that. And I still like the characters. It's fun to see Ghostbird is just ripped.
Yeah. Honestly, she came across as a totally different character in this. Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. He could just keep sending teams in to explore it. And I think that it would take on a much more episodic character if that was the case. Tune in next week to find out, what the next team uncovers and what, whether they can bring it back. I feel like Lost, for example, or something where you have like a slow revelation. But here, we're not really revealing anything. And it feels like the stakes of this book aren't really built off the stakes of the previous book at all.
That's true too. Yeah, it feels like
it's a new dynamic and a new stake set in the same world. Part of what I was wondering, though, was if you only read this book, would it be a satisfying book? Or do you only care about what happens because, in a sense, Area X is the main character, and we care about what happens with Area X? You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. I think it feels like it's a good enough standalone book to only read this. I know that'd be very strange, but I think I think some people don't like Rodriguez. A lot of people say that he's boring. I really liked him. I think he's interesting. And I think that his look at this, is giving an honest try while people are trying to lie to him, people are trying to trick him, people are actually hypnotizing him too. The voice is giving him signals to make him follow his instructions. He is just trying to do something honest and figure out what Area X is, and he is listening to opinions. He's working with people. So I would say Authority is pretty good.
I liked it too. I might have even liked it more than the first book, but I'm not sure. Let's hold that thought until the very end, and we can really see what we think. But I think it's a great follow up, and I want to see more series take this kind of real circumlocution around the setting and the topic that VanderMeer is doing with this series. So I guess onward to book 3. Talk to you later,
That's
Bob.
right. Let's jump into that weird tide pool. Talk to you later, Zach.
Yes.